During the pandemic, a very dear friend of mine, Claire Harpin, suggested to me that I should consider training as a celebrant. She was getting married and she wanted to be me to be the celebrant for her wedding. And I said, well, I haven't a clue what to do. I wouldn't know where to begin. And she said, well, I think you would be made for it. And that conversation, which I took with a pinch of salt, actually began to sow a seed of an idea for me. So I began searching online. I asked advice locally and I discovered that two people that I was acquainted with were also celebrants. And I asked them where they'd been training and what their training involved. But then I came across Veronika Robinson's website, and something in me knew I had to pick up the phone. And the moment I spoke to you, I intuitively knew that you were the person I needed to learn from. Veronika's heart-led Celebrancy training wasn't just informative, it was transformative. It became a gift that opened me to deeper understandings of life and death, and to discovering parts of me that I hadn't really fully encountered before. Together with her husband Paul, an extraordinary voice coach, Veronika created a space of guidance and creativity that drew me into a whole new path. Because of them, I have found myself walking alongside people at the most profound moments of their lives, celebrating weddings, honouring the dying, conducting funerals, which I never imagined I would do, and also leading other sacred celebrations of life. I will never forget this training, or the way Veronika and Paul opened a garden of beauty before me, a world of being of service in the most extraordinary way. So today it is a joy and an honour to welcome Reverend Veronika Robinson, author, celebrant, celebrant trainer, retreat hostess and community minister to this podcast. Good morning.
Hello, and thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you here. Can I follow up your beautiful introduction by saying that I'm thrilled it has been all those things for you, but also that with a training like this, it's what people bring to it as well. And you have brought such grace and beauty and care and mindfulness. So what you got out of it is essentially what you put into it in the first place.
Well, that's very, very kind. I think one of the things that I discovered was a love of creative writing, which I never thought I could do. Do you know, when I was at school, one of my English teachers told me that I should write about things I knew because I wasn't very imaginative. And it's one of those things that really, really stuck. And the training that you offered, I found it really intense actually at the time.
It is intense.
I never knew, how long it would take. I didn't think it would be, quite that, intense is definitely the word. But it almost gave me permission to write. And in the process of that, I really realised how much I loved it. And I hadn't realised that before. I also, when I spoke to a lady she just trained to be a funeral celebrant, when I spoke to her about her training, it was very format-led. And your training was all about being imaginative. Don't spout out a bibliography of somebody's life. Get to the essence of that person. And that essence needs to come out because that is what people will connect with. So tell us a little bit about how you started, where this all began for you.
It's an interesting question because I could say it began in 1995 when I trained to be a wedding celebrant, or specifically to do weddings. But actually my whole childhood was embedded in a sense of ceremony and ritual because of the mother I had, where she could make the simplest things feel sacred.
Wow.
And so I feel like my childhood was an apprenticeship for what then became the more formal element of training.
Yeah, I don't think if I'd had this training when I was much younger, that would have brought into how I operate as a celebrant some of the, I suppose, life wisdoms that we learn through the people that we've known and through the paths that we've followed. And particularly, I mean, it's 17 years this year since my husband died. But I think I avoided death. I think it's a very normal thing to do that, to not want to talk about it, discuss it, or bring it up. And certainly when he died, I felt as though my grief was private. I didn't want to inflict it onto other people. And that taught me a huge amount about meeting death and facing it. But also, I've been drawn into, quite by accident, walking alongside people in the last few months or weeks before they pass away. And that's been so golden. The authenticity, the truth, the light that they carry is phenomenal. And I never knew that.
Yeah.
And I know I've told you this before, but on the first day of our training, when we sat down, well, we had to do it all over Zoom, didn't we? Because we're in a pandemic. And on the first day, you said, right, we'll start with funerals. And I said, oh, no, I only want to do weddings. And you said, well, no, you've paid for the course, so you'll do the course. So we start with funerals. But it was just the biggest gift. It was just an enormous gift because I really thought that all I needed to do was weddings. I'll just do the joy. But there's still joy in the funerals.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to, as you say, walk alongside someone, an individual or a family when they're going through this. We often say, oh, it's deeply rewarding, but I don't think that really does justice to that experience. At one level, it can be that we are giving. We're giving of our time or our experience, our creativity, our empathy, but actually we're receiving the whole time as well. It's not one way.
No. So was there a pivotal moment for you when you sort of felt called to step into this role? I know you sort of said it was an all-encompassing part of the way that you were brought up. Was there a moment, or was there a gradual realization this was what you wanted to do?
So I was about 26 and I was working with a lady who officiated weddings, and it just struck me as the most romantic job in the world. It was as simple as that. It's like, wow, that's amazing. And by nature, I am a romantic. I spent my teenage years reading Nils Boom novels. There was that sense of love just being so strong. So she trained me to be a celebrant,
Right.
which was, fantastic. But I avoided funerals for the next 20 years from the point of view of not being scared of death, but of my own levels of empathy and not wanting to cry in front of an audience.
Because that can be hard at times, can't it?
Yeah, particularly hard. And so I was really dragged kicking and screaming into funerals. And a friend whose wedding I had done and the children's naming ceremonies had said, Dad's dying, we want you to do his funeral. And, I panicked. Like, it wasn't that I didn't know how to do the job. It was around the emotion. Well, as it turned out, he took 5 years to die, so I had a bit of preparation. But when I got the call that he died, I spent the next week or so just crying, thinking, I can't do this. I can't do it. But obviously I did do it, and I managed to do it without falling to pieces. But it's very hard to watch people you know and love suffering and in grief and having to keep it together. And it was a funeral where the crematorium was packed, overflowing. And a lot of them were elderly people because The gentleman in question was elderly. And the thing that I heard over and over again when I came out of that funeral was, that was the best funeral we've ever been to. Now, they had no idea it was my first funeral.
Yeah.
And yes, I had 20 years of celebrancy behind me, but, to go through that process, because I do feel it is quite different in many ways. But every time I heard that question, I kept thinking, well, why? How could it be? What's happening that these people who are well-versed in funerals are saying that? And it's something I've heard a lot, obviously, since then, but it made me think, if that's the case, then who am I not to be doing funerals?
Yeah.
What's getting in the way of that? And so I, very slowly put myself out there, but it was not easy. And I often would come home, I would get a hot water bottle and go to bed. I just felt like, oh my gosh, I need something to protect me. As I got used to doing them, I didn't need to do that, or I'd go for a walk in the woods or barefoot on the grass or something like that. And obviously, when you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them under your belt, then you can go into that role and come out of it without taking all that grief with you. But it took me a long time to be able to do that. But it doesn't mean I don't still get caught out now with, unexpectedly feeling like, oh, how do I maintain that? So, for example, last year, as my mum lay dying in Australia, and I was over here still officiating funerals, each time I was doing a funeral for someone's mother and having to say those words and thinking, any day now it's me, any day now it's me saying goodbye, it was a unique form of trauma, to go through that for a good solid 2 months.
Yeah, gosh, yes.
So, yeah.
You had a particular closeness with your mother.
Yeah.
You had
Yeah.
this sort of deep connection.
Yeah.
So to be separated from her at that time was very difficult for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about you having to do funerals at the same time.
Yeah.
Gosh, yes.
And of course, with anticipatory grief, certainly in my experience, comes a lot of insomnia,
Yeah,
which is the last thing you need when you've got to get up the next day and function and be on top of everything.
yeah.
So, when you talked about the training being intense, it has to be intense because this job can be intense.
Mm.
And even if you're, only doing weddings, for example, that has an intensity to it in a different way.
Well, I do remember thinking that, God, we had to get things done by a certain time. So you'd give me something to do, but it had to be ready for the next morning and ready for the next morning. And I remember thinking, surely it wouldn't be like this. But I've had some funerals at very, very, very short notice, either because somebody's been lined up and then something's happened with that, and could you pick it up? Or, I mean, I had one which was very short notice because the the widow was young. She had a 7-year-old son, and she wanted to have the funeral while he was at school. So she farmed around to find a creme. 3 days. 3 days I had to pull this together. And she was very they had been expecting it because he had been fighting cancer for a long time, but her biggest concern was for her son, and it had to finish by this time, and it had to be, and that was the time when I thought, well, it's just as well Veronika.
That's why I have for whip.
Because that it you have to turn things around fast sometimes. Equally, somebody can approve a script, can't they? And then the night before, they'll say, "Oh, Auntie Joyce is coming. You've got to take this out, and you've got to put that, or whatever. You change it. You know that we've forgotten something, or could you put this in?" And you've neatly bound your copy to give them, and it's all and you've got to turn on a sixpence.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. I did love it, that it was called, whether you've called it heart-led celebrant training, because for me, I suppose that was the thing that attracted me. looking around it because there's an awful lot of celebrancy trainings around. And then when I picked up the phone, I can remember when it was, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and I heard your voice. I thought, oh God, yes. I didn't go any further with any of the others that I'd been given. I just went, yes. And I think that was probably the most intuitive decision I had made in a long time.
Oh. Oh, lovely. It's interesting because I remember the day when Paul and I chose the title for the training. We were driving, I think, to Glasgow and just playing with different ideas, different words, and we both just kept saying it has to come back to the heart. That's
Yeah.
what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And you operate really from your heart in your daily living, don't you?
I would like to think it's a heart-led life. But to be clear, I'm not a saint. I am human.
Yeah.
And, so I had an experience last week that definitely felt like it was taking me out of my heart and into a self I remember from quite some time ago. And I remember saying to Paul, I don't want to be that person. I want to do this with grace and with calmness, which I managed to do to a certain degree. But, all these things are practices, they're choices.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as well, I mean, certainly with a wedding, you've got two happy participants coming along to chat. And, I've had one or two where the groom is less vocal than the bride, but we get through there in the end. But some of the interfamily relationships amongst some of the funerals can be quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I know you said, be prepared for that in the training, but it can be quite demanding of you because you're sometimes navigating more than one person's view of how they want everything to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I would say 90% of the funerals I've done, which is nothing like the number that you've done, are beautiful, very easy. But the other thing is, at a time of grief, we're none of us ourselves, are we?
That is true. Grief has a massive impact, but one of the things I often think, because we can use grief to say, oh, that they're just being like that because they're grieving or whatever. But I think grief is like money. It just brings out who we really are.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, oh, that you wouldn't be sad or anything like that. But, if you're a nasty person, grief isn't going to make you,
Nicer.
yeah, it just amplifies who we are.
Yeah.
Same if you want £1,000,000, you're still going to be beautiful Kay. You're still going to be that lovely. It's not going to change you in that sense.
Yeah. No, I hear the story behind the story. One of the things that you gave me to start the training was your book,
Mm-hmm.
the handbook. And I mean, I was trained I can't remember, 4 years ago. I've lost track of time, but I still refer to that to keep me fresh. Otherwise, I fall into familiar ways of trying to put ceremony together. So it's such a wonderful aid memoir, and it's so simple. Was that the first thing you ever wrote, or what have you been writing for a long time?
I've been writing for a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and, when I came into doing the training, it wasn't something I'd planned to do. It was just that in my posting wedding pictures and funeral related images on Instagram, somebody said, oh, would you teach me to be a celebrant? And it just hadn't ever occurred to me. And so because of that question, I decided, I would run a weekend training, which I did in my village at a holiday home that we'd booked. And we had 6 lovely people attend that. And it felt amazing. It was wonderful. So I thought, maybe I'll do that again in 6 months. And I did. And then another 6 months later, another one. But by that stage, someone had said, would you teach me one-to-one? And then the one-to-one just went through the roof.
yeah. That.
And so I stopped doing group training, just did the one-to-one, just changing things slightly now so that we can still do the one-to-one for the diploma, but for the certificate, small group trainings on Zoom, so people don't have to travel or spend money on accommodation. But yeah, definitely not something I had planned to do. But what I love is seeing, our graduates out in the world like yourself and the beauty and care that you're creating and putting out in your community.
Mm. Well, I can't do sort of like several close together because I find it, to be honest, too exhausting.
It
And
is.
because I try to put my all into each one and see each person
Mm.
as that unique person. Um, and I suppose, but I have met people who say, "Oh, we do however many a week," and I said, "How do you do it?"
Yeah.
But I think, that people have different ways, don't they? But
But also, if you're wired in the way that you and I are, broadly speaking, you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually could not do 20 funerals a week.
oh God, no.
4 a week for me is a full-time job.
Yeah.
With the amount of driving and writing and meetings and all the rest of it, that's a full-time job. And I couldn't do that week after week. I need to pull back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did 4 in a 2-week period and needed to take no more for another 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt stressed.
Yeah.
It
It
was
it's a lot because you've got a lot of names, a lot of stories, maybe a lot of funeral directors, a lot of venues. There's so many things that come into it. I had, a week recently where in that course of the week, there were 3 people with the same name. That's a really quick way to mess with your head, Or where few deceased in a row that all had siblings with the same sort of names. And you have to be able to go, right, this is the ceremony I'm at. This is my person. This is their family. If you're at the lectern all day long, of course you're going to get names wrong. And I hear this all the time. Celebrants getting names wrong.
Mm.
But when you go for quality rather than quantity, that's very unlikely to happen.
Yeah. 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 Well, I can't do it, I think. Um, I mean, you've written, apart from Celebrancy books, you've written novels as well, haven't you?
Mhm.
Um, is that because you like exploring relationships or what's the...
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to grow up and be a writer, but I hadn't really thought much about what that would look like. So I started off, well, my first book was poetry, um, and then just nonfiction around parenting related topics, some recipe books, health, different things like that. So when the novels came, that was lovely. And I love writing novels. My challenge with writing novels is that because there are so many characters in my head, a bit like if you've got several funerals on the go, because there are so many characters and they consume my every waking moment once they're let in, when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, when I'm cooking tea, that I actually need a lot of space to let them in and to listen to how they want the story to go. Because I'm not really the creator, they are. When I write nonfiction, I can do half an hour here, half an hour there, or whatever, fit it in amongst other things. Or, if I've got flu, I can just sit on the sofa for a week and write a book. I can't do that with fiction. It's
Yeah.
completely different energy for me.
If these podcasts have touched you in any way and you'd like to support what I'm doing, you can do so through the Buy Me a Coffee link. Whether it's one coffee or a few, your kindness helps me to keep creating and offering these sessions freely. Every bit of support means so much, so thank you truly from my heart. So for you, the characters in your fiction evolve and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whereas your non-fiction, I mean, you cover, as you say, parenting, education, health, and celebrancy.
Quite a few Celebrant books now, yeah. So, they all have a certain amount of structure. the message I know that needs to be said or taught or whatever. It's just a really different process.
I think for celebrants, I mean, I've bought your books from Amazon, so if any celebrants listening or any celebrants wanting to know more, they can get your books on Amazon, so it's worth them knowing. Um, you made me feel as though ceremony is itself a form of storytelling. I went to a funeral soon after I'd completed the course, and I found myself criticizing the celebrant, which is not very nice.
Occupation hazard.
Where I've only just begun. I've still really got my L plates on, so it was very judgmental at the time. But because I'd been exposed to, creating these stories around people, it sounded so flat, and it also didn't seem very cohesive, where there were threads going through and around and into the committal and into the wording of the committal. So, um, who was it who said it to me? Somebody said to me, it was a vicar quite a while ago, who said, I wish I did some celebrants training. He said, because you're the second person that I've attended because mostly he goes to religious ones. You're the second person that I thought, oh, I could learn a bit from that.
Mm. Well, one of the things certainly Paul has mentioned when he's worked with vicars, for example, is how often they'll say in their training, there was nothing around voice and communication, nothing around storytelling. So naturally, they write the CV style eulogy. And that's what people, including a lot of celebrants, think you have to do. And as you know from the way I work, is that I look at the themes of someone's life. And so I don't necessarily write in chronological order. In fact, I rarely write in chronological order.
Yeah. I think that's very unique, that the training that you and Paul have set up, because that voice coaching, I found it so helpful. I mean, I know there's some within, the package of what you pay for, but then afterwards, I would email Paul a time or two and say, this particular difficult one, or could you help me? And he was always prepared to help me. And I think for me, it just gave me that bit of confidence.
Yeah.
That's I felt that it was more refined as a result of knowing when to slow down a bit, when to let go a bit. As he kept saying to me, give it light and shade. And in the process, there's more depth to the storytelling of its life or somebody's love story or whatever it is.
And so that storytelling, in one sense, should be felt throughout the ceremony, not just with a love story or eulogy, but even in the way we do our words of welcome, the way we do a committal. And of course, if we have a ritual is telling a story as well. That story might be visual, it might be auditory, it might be using our sense of smell or something else. But I think at every step of the way, it is about storytelling. But also, even in our moments of silence, the way we hold that space for everybody is a form of storytelling.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that one of the things that probably helped me with allowing moments of silence was my yoga teacher training, in that before I trained as a yoga teacher or a qigong teacher, I would try filler silence. But, particularly in a funeral, it's a very powerful space to hold, isn't it?
Yes. So one of the things I'll often say in training is that everything about our life, everything we do, our daily practices, the experiences that we have had, they all shape us. And whatever it is that shaped us, we take with us to every ceremony. So even before we open our mouth or whatever our script is, we are telling a story by our body, our mannerism, our energy. And so, when I relayed that story a few minutes ago about having an experience recently, and how am I going to react to that?
Yeah.
These are all the things that we start being mindful of because they shape who we are when we go in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And so we always want to bring a sense of what is it I would like this audience to feel?
Yeah.
And regardless of the type of ceremony, because even a funeral can be one of humor, from beginning to end.
Oh, yes,
But
indeed.
but what is this ceremony mean to my client? What does it mean to me? And then I think, as I'm driving there, I'll just say, make me a channel. Whoever is listening to me in whatever, world, make me a channel of, and it might be kindness,
Yeah.
gentleness, it might be humor, um, something else altogether, but let me be that.
Yeah.
Because for me, first and foremost, the ceremonies are never about me. They're about my client. They might be about the wedding guests or mourners or whatever the ceremony is. I'm there to hold that space, and I'm like the spine, if you like,
Mm.
but my light is shining on someone else, not on myself.
Yeah. I found that really helpful advice actually, because um, you know, that I remember you saying very distinctly to me, this is not about you. This is about either the person that's passed away or the couple getting married. It's not about you. And you gave little tips, things like, feel your feet. So you're grounded. Just
Mhm.
take that moment. All of those things, those are like little rituals that I have.
Mhm.
I'm not too
Mhm.
much in my head, so that I'm feeling connected to the floor. Um, and your book, that you sent out, the handbook, there were all sorts of really sensible things like get there in good time, take some water in case you. But these actually are very practical things because especially when I began, it's a routine now, so I'm all right.
Mhm.
But when I began, don't forget to take some water, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. It helped me a lot to 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 be able to be composed, even if I wasn't feeling it.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing because that ceremony space is our office, so to speak. It's our workspace. And so anything we can do to feel as relaxed as possible, then by extension is fed to the audience. If we're stressed because we've gotten stuck in traffic or we've arrived late, um, if we've got a headache or anything, all of that comes with us. So the calmer we are, the more they receive that.
Mm. Is there one type of ceremony that feels especially close to your heart?
I particularly love blessing way ceremonies. That's a ceremony for a woman around the 8th month of pregnancy
Yeah.
to welcome her into motherhood. And that's whether it's a first child or a 10th. It's, to honor that transition. So it's not like a traditional baby shower type thing. It's, you know, by nature, a spiritual ceremony to cross that threshold. And it's ritual based rather than um, narrative heavy, and just has some really beautiful rituals in there. Uh, so that does rank as one of my favorites. But then I also really enjoy interment of ashes ceremonies because in almost all cases I've already worked with the family, whether it was that morning, the week before, or even a few months before. So I have that relationship, and then we come to the grave site, and just a handful of people, whether it's 2, 10, but not many. It's intimate, it's short as well. That's not why I like it, but it's intimate, and we're outdoors, and I always like outdoor ceremonies. Um, they just feel like a nice private closing off of that funeral that we've had.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, yes. Okay. Oh well, I haven't done either of those ceremonies in
Mhm.
I haven't come across them before or haven't been asked to do them. Um, but no, that's very interesting. Okay. So, you also do some ceremonies that I wouldn't call part of mainstream culture in many ways, whatever the parting of the ways and
Mhm.
sort of ones. Um, I mean, they're, they're beautiful to do. Who approaches you for those sort of ceremonies?
Usually people who've become aware of me or have a sense of, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for example, I had someone I had met because a friend of hers had trained with me. We'd had that connection. Uh, and she was getting married, and they wanted me to do the wedding. However, because she'd been married 4 times before, and he'd been married 3 times before, they were both really clear something needed to happen before that wedding. So we did a cord cutting ceremony, and we did it on New Year's Eve, so so that we could sort of let one year go and step into the new year together. And without going into too much detail, but I created a cord or a ribbon to represent each of their previous relationships, and I would be at one end, almost like as the proxy for
Yeah.
each previous marriage, so that we could cut that cord. So we could energetically give thanks for anything that had been learned from those relationships. There was real clearing before they moved on to their own wedding.
Yeah, I suggested to someone that I knew who was separating from his partner that they found a way of closing it with dignity. Now, they both had a faith, and so they went to their minister and did it that way. And he said to me they both found it very emotional but very powerful. So I don't think many people would necessarily think of that. So it's good to express it and
Yeah.
make
And
it.
if you think about weddings, there is so much money, for the most part, spent on weddings. There's so much build-up, there's so much, the ceremony, the dress, the cake, the guests, everything. Even with a small wedding, there's still build-up. But when we come to the end of a marriage, what do we have? When does that moment end? Is it at the first thought of, we're not right together anymore? Is it when the wedding ring comes off? Is it when they move out? Is it when they get the divorce paper? There's nothing
Yeah.
that really gives us that sense of, right, how do we come out of this intact with love and respect for ourselves and the other?
Yeah.
And so I think having those sorts of ceremonies are really important.
Yeah.
The difficulty is that a lot of people have usually tried to destroy each other quite a lot by that point. It takes a certain sort of person that, willingly comes to a ceremony like that.
Yeah. Have you ever been surprised by some of the ceremonies you've created? Have you yeah,
Yeah.
like
I suppose one that comes to mind was someone who, just trying to be careful of confidential details, but her husband had passed and she still, um, had some sperm so that she could,
yeah.
conceive, that was their arrangement. Um, but she'd not had any joy, so we had a conception ceremony. We were by an ancient, like 3,000-year-old spring, and we did some rituals around that. She now has 10-year-old twins.
Oh, how fantastic.
So that there's, which might have happened anyway, it might be nothing to do with the ceremony. But from her perspective, there was a shift that happened in that.
Well, I'm a great believer in feng shui, and I think if you raise the vibration, yeah, and I wouldn't doubt that it would have raised the vibration a lot. Gosh, how beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. It feels very special, and I remember doing a ceremony, for someone once. It was in vow renewal. They'd had 10 years of a lot of difficulty, not between themselves in their marriage, but extended family and friends, and they just wanted a fresh start. However, when I got to their place that day for the ceremony, there was a lot of alcohol involved and things like that, um, and I just felt a bit out of place and like, "Oh, what am I even doing here?" And it was about 6 months later that I got a card in the post from them saying, "I don't know what you did that day, but something changed. Everything feels different in our house, and there's an incredible calmness here."
Oh, wow.
And it was like I kept rereading the card thinking, "Is that really the same couple?" not the ceremony I really went to. We never know how we impact people, in little ways, in big ways. The number of times I've done a funeral and people will come up after saying, I was really adamant I wanted this, this, and this for my funeral, but actually, no, I want what that person had now. And sometimes it's opening people's eyes to something different.
Yeah.
I think one ceremony, that I created without asking for this person. So, an elderly person I know who had fallen down some stairs, and in the process, her little finger was ripped off because the ring got stuck. I won't go into details, but this is a woman who has used her hands a lot in life. Her wedding rings, her eternity rings, a lot of rings on her hands, always manicured, had worked in the post office for years, so, the hands were important in her life. And she's an avid card writer. Hundreds of cards every Christmas, birthdays, whatever. And one of the things she expressed was how she felt like no one understood how traumatic it was losing her finger. In terms of her identity, but also all the rings on her ring finger had to be cut off because of the swelling. So there's precious rings from her late husband, and I really sensed all this trauma. So I went to visit her one day, having written this ceremony, and I said, I've created a ceremony for you. Are you open to me doing it? So it was just the two of us at her dining table, and, there were rituals in there, like me just massaging where the finger had been, doing things like that. But mostly what I did was I wrote a eulogy for the finger, but actually what it was mostly a sense of gratitude and going through all the things that her hands have done in this lifetime.
Wow.
And the way they've touched and whatnot, and it was hugely healing for her, to have that acknowledged.
Goodness. Yeah, that's powerful healing work. It really is, Veronika. That's really powerful. So when you sit down to write a ceremony, because I know they're all bespoke and handwritten, you don't have a template, you have a vision. How do you start the creative process?
Mhm. Generally with whatever's coming to my mind. So, for example, if I've been to visit a bereaved family and, I've listened to them for a couple of hours talking about their loved one. As I'm driving home, I'm thinking, what's the thing that stood out for me the most about this person? What's the image I can't let go of? Because that will almost certainly be the thing that I open the eulogy with.
Right.
So, for example, I had someone, I'm guessing from memory, he was about in his 90s when he died. Now, often with the elderly, that's what people are remembering is that old person. But what really stood out for me was him in his 20s and something about doing backflips when he did the jive and things like that. And so that was the person I was seeing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages I find when I come in as a celebrant is I'm looking at the whole life. People are often looking at the end, particularly if the person's had dementia or they've been in hospice. They're stuck in a little time warp at the end where I'm like, we're going back to the beginning. I want to look at the whole lot. I want to see what they loved, what their passions were, and that's a really important thing to me. But regardless of the type of ceremony, I just let images come to me. Whether it's a wedding couple or a naming or any of the other types of ceremonies, like what's coming. I think because I can freeform like that, it's really down to the fact that I have a strong sense of what ceremony structure is,
Yeah.
what I need to go from separating from the ordinary world, traveling through that threshold, that liminal space with my client, and then for them to go back out into the ordinary world, but changed in some way. And so I can set my scaffolding for the ceremony, the different parts of it within that. And then whatever those ideas are coming to me, I know where they're going to go in the ceremony. So it might be that I have an idea for something that I think will make a beautiful ritual, and I'll have a sense of where that would go in the ceremony.
Goodness. Yes. Okay. So what do you think makes an excellent celebrant? What qualities?
Awareness, and awareness starts with self. So being aware, do I have mannerisms? Am I tugging on my hair every 2 minutes? Am I saying, yeah, 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 or da 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 da? There's all sorts of things that we can have. Being able to almost forensically study yourself so that you know what your client is experiencing, whether that's in a meeting, on a phone call, Zoom, or when you're officiating a ceremony. Because when you can do that, then you can start looking at other people and picking up those things. So when I walk into the home of a bereaved family, and maybe there might be 10 people sitting there, I can immediately tell you who hasn't spoken to who in the past 30 years.
Right.
I can tell who's going to be the bossy sibling. I can tell who, because I can tell you if your parents die, or, it's the second parent that's died in particular, doesn't matter if you're 70 years old, on that day, you're 7 again. Everyone reverts to whatever they were when they were children. So when I come in, I see that, like, it's just so crystal clear to me. So awareness, I think, is the number one thing. You have to do the job well, you have to have a really good sense of human psychology. There are two fundamental things you need. One is to be able to take direction from a client. What do they want? What do they expect? And what do they need? And the other is to give direction. For example, they want 20 pieces of music and you got a 20-minute slot. It's not happening. Or if they're adamant that they don't want the music shortened, they don't want the eulogy shortened, somewhere you have to put your foot down. You have to have strong boundaries. You'd mentioned earlier about clients that want things changed at the last minute. I have a strong boundary of 48 hours before the funeral, no last minute changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, I've heard stories of celebrants walking up the aisle in the crematorium still taking notes, and it's like, no. For my own clarity and peace of mind and my rehearsal process, 2 days before.
One of the things that really did surprise me and take me back, of course, it's common sense in retrospect, but was how little time you have in the creme. Now, I've led funerals in the Northeast, and in the Northeast, they are far more fluid in the timings that they give you. That especially in some of the sort of more remote cremes, that they might not have another one to follow. And so, I always ring up and just, can you let me know what the timings are for a slot? A Harrogate slot is 40 minutes, and people say, oh, well, I'll just take one slot because it's 40 minutes, that's plenty of time. But it isn't, because the time you actually get at Harrogate Creme is 20 minutes.
Plenty, yeah.
And that includes people coming in and going out, unless you get them seated first, which I always try to do anyway. But if it's a big ceremony, to get them out, you can't expect people to run out.
Yeah.
So 20 minutes is up. And I've turned up to conduct a funeral, and there was a vicar in the car park with a group of people. Harrogate will turn you out. And he got turned out, and he was finishing off the ceremony in the car park. So trying to get that across to people is quite tricky. I find myself almost obsessed with the clock. And in fact, I've got actually to the point where I say to people, if you want a lot of music, then please will you book a double slot?
Yeah.
Because if you have 3 pieces of music and people in and people out, we probably have somewhere around about 8 minutes to run through the whole of somebody's life, do the committal, welcome, say goodbye, everything in between. Is that what you really want from them? And that's a challenging.
It is. But that time boundary is a really crucial part of the job. And so the first thing I do when I sit with a family is manage those expectations. I'll say, has the funeral director told you how long we've got? And they'll all say 40 minutes. And I'll say, well, actually what it is it's 40 minutes from one ceremony to the start of the next ceremony, which means we have 20 minutes And the other 20 minutes is for the movement of people, for creme staff to come and vacuum clean up, that sort of thing. And I will time my scripts to about 17, 18 minutes to just allow that bit of leeway. Because as you say, that clock, it's the bane of my life.
Yeah.
It's
But the other thing, it's the unpredictable thing, is when you get people who say, I'm going to do a tribute, and it's 4 minutes long or it's 5 minutes long, and they get up, and it's almost as if you need the shepherd's crook
yeah.
to cut them off. And you suddenly find yourself looking down at the ceremony that you have spent a long time putting together and thinking, I'm going to have to cut it short. What bits can I cut out? We don't have the time to complete it all. And people who say that they're going to do 4 or 5 minutes and do 8, they don't realize that.
Well, so I have everybody who, because I've been burnt
Yeah.
in this way badly. So, and what a lot of people don't realize is that the funeral director gets fined if you run late.
Yeah.
And a lot of the funeral directors pass that fine on to the client. And I don't ever want to be in a situation where I have led to that happening.
No.
So anyone who's doing a tribute has to send me their tribute within a certain amount of time so that I can check the timing, because people they have no idea how to time it, but I can see from a word count what it's going to take. And I'm really clear to them, you need to stick with this. When people say, oh, I'm just using bullet points, it's like, no, you need to write it out and you need to tell me what you're going to say. And it's hard, but that is an essential part of the job, is to manage that space.
Yeah, well, and also the creme staff have to manage the timings that they have. And certainly Harrogate creme is a busy creme.
Yeah.
So, you can't mess about with it. Whereas I've found in the Northeast, if you do 40 minutes, they'll say, we're not fast. You can do 30, you can do 35, we're fine.
It's very unusual.
I know.
But also there are things that, we get a lot of people in the afternoons fainting because it gets so hot in the chapel.
Yeah.
So you've got to take into account that as well when you're dealing with someone. And
Yeah. There's all sorts of things that happen that you don't expect. I conducted a funeral where it was 2 sisters who'd lost their mother. And one sister had a fallout with the other the day before the funeral. So only one turned up at the funeral. And she was as distressed about having fallen out with her sister as she was about her mother. So I was at a point at which I'm usually trying to remove myself and be in my head. I'm trying to comfort her before we go in. And oh, yes.
those human relationships are really tricky.
Yeah, of course.
It's pretty rare for me to come across a family where there isn't some sort of estrangement or dysfunction. It's part of the human story.
Yeah. So you host retreats in Cumbria. So just explain what sort of happens in those retreats and why they're important.
So I've been hosting retreats for celebrants, and we have a different topic each time. For example, we had one on hand fasting and hand tying, so that wedding celebrants could really get a sense of the difference between those two things. We had one on creative writing for celebrants, one on beautiful bereavement ceremonies, and our most recent one was on creativity. So we had guest tutors come in to do things like calligraphy, hand building quaich from clay, a creativity coach. It was just, lovely.
I did really enjoy learning about all the rituals. I had never realized there were so many out there. I did love that. I always try to get, especially for a wedding, I always try to get people involved in some form of ritual. It adds an air of fun and joy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who it's by. It says, "When words are inadequate, have a ritual."
oh, right, okay.
And I think that really says a lot.
Yeah.
That we come to those moments in our life where something as simple as lighting a candle, can express so much.
I also found it fascinating as well because in the training, You asked us to sort of find a piece or a reading for, Buddhist wedding or funeral, or a Sikh one. I mean, what you were offering is so different because you're open to all spiritual traditions, um, and all faiths, and that I really enjoyed looking into that. I mean, my opportunities to do a Sikh wedding in Harrogate probably pretty thin on the ground, but I still like knowing it because I did do a wedding for a couple who were yogis, and they wanted
Mm,
some
lovely.
Buddhist teachings in there,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh gosh, I know what I've got. I've got
Yeah.
training,
Yeah.
uh, so I felt it was very rounded.
Yeah. And of course, because I'm even further north than you are, I think the further north you go, the chances of getting anything more unusual slim down a lot. Um, whereas if you're a celebrant in London, you're going to be exposed to all sorts of faiths and cultures.
Yeah, but even, I suppose to some degree, Leeds or Birmingham or Liverpool,
Mhm.
Manchester. Yeah.
I did a wedding a couple of years ago that was a really good example of the benefit of having a celebrant because their beliefs covered so many things. There was Egyptology, there was Wicca, there was tarot, there was Jewish, there was some Catholicism. There was just like such a mix. And, the beauty of being an independent celebrant was that I could actually just weave all those different things in there so that it felt utterly seamless.
Yeah, because I did, I've sort of observed your spiritual path draws on a wide range of traditions, metaphysics and theosophy and Zen and astrology and plant medicine and more, Um, have you woven these into your own spiritual practices?
So yeah, they are part of my spiritual practices. So the theosophy was right from a little child. My
Was that
mother
your
would,
mum?
yeah, yeah, that definitely was a large part of my childhood. And then other things have just grown from there because I'm naturally curious, and I don't tend to necessarily take on one thing and fully identify with it. I like to go, what do I love about this? What resonates? What can I take? What
Yeah,
can I take from that? What can I learn from that?
yeah, I love it. How has your understanding of the divine feminine shaped your ministry?
I think one of the things for me is because I naturally include my mother, my
Yeah.
physical earth mother, as part of the divine feminine because she taught me about that as a child. So that was a normal way of me experiencing divinity rather than the patriarchal, be fearful of God and all the rest of it. Whereas I was almost embraced by the cloak of the divine feminine, if there was such a thing.
And you wear a cloak a lot.
I do to her, not as gracefully, look more like Pavarotti. Um, so I would say it shaped every aspect of my life
Yeah.
because the feminine, and I don't mean it from a gender point of view, I mean it energetically in terms of, um, I think the divine feminine loves beauty and luxury and kindness and softness.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. You quote Khalil Gibran. I love
Ah,
Gibran.
my favorite. Yeah.
Work is love made visible.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
How do you live that truth through your service?
Um, by the nature of that I choose my working life. I've been self-employed for more than 30 years, so I have that choice in how I express myself.
Mm.
Um, it would be very hard for me to go and work for someone else now, even though obviously I take direction all the time from my clients.
Yeah.
Um, yes, there is always that element of, um, some people can't wait to retire, and I actually would like more space in my life. There is no question about that. But I can't ever see an endpoint where I'm not working.
It's very much a purpose, though. That's worry. Everybody needs a purpose. I totally see that. Yeah, certainly my promise to myself this year, the word I chose for this year was spaciousness, to try and create more space. And you do sort of suggest that y people need rest to renew, to be creative. As you said earlier, you can't be tired. That things don't happen. I mean, you support projects like Lend with Care and Habitat for Humanity and Tree Sisters. So philanthropy is an integral part of you and your life. Yeah.
Mhm. I think by nature I've always been an activist,
Yeah.
but as I get older, it's been for a while now, but, certainly when I was younger where I would go out and do things and, work for this cause or that cause, and although I'm not doing that now, I think when I financially give to someone, for example, one of the ones that I support is, Ukrainian children who've been orphaned during this war. I'm not there on the front line, I'm not doing anything, I'm not physically working with those children, but each time a payment is processed, my consciousness is very much about someone is doing this work. So, you can say philanthropy comes from a place of kindness, but it also comes from a place of I can't be everywhere at once. But these are the things that I can help so that other people, say with Tree Sisters, which I think is an amazing organization.
I haven't heard of it before. So what is it?
Just rewilding this earth,
Yeah,
and working with communities, giving them a source, purpose, and income to, be planting trees everywhere.
beautiful.
And yeah, they do amazing stuff and meditations and all sorts of things that I feel like they're really coming from, oh, we're not just planting trees. It's got a bigger energy than that.
Yeah.
And things like Lend with Care is, again, amazing. They give microloans in what we would call third world countries. And they're loans that to you and I would be like, how's that even a loan? It's so small, but actually for someone, it's going to buy grain or buy their chickens or whatever. And then they, commit to paying back, and it might only be £1 at a time or whatever. But, they make that commitment, but they're growing their businesses, and
Yeah.
it just feels like such a lovely way of supporting people.
Yes. Because it can be pivotal for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I've worked for charities, so there's always that element of me that can be suspicious. Like, who's actually getting this money? Is it just going to some CEO? So I'm very careful about where I give money to, because I won't name the organization, big charity. And I remember years ago, and we were really struggling financially as a family at the time, and I gave something like £25 to whatever the cause was at the time, only to find out later that they had spent hundreds of thousands on a potential advertising campaign. Someone in the office decided they didn't like it and it was scrapped.
Oh,
And I thought, but that £25 to me at the time could have been 2.5 grand. Could have been any amount, but it was a lot.
and the trouble is, these are the charities that don't get public funding.
Yeah.
I support something called Project Peru, and I came across it through my son Charlie. He had been supporting it, and he went out to Peru, and it's where orphaned Peruvian children are given education and uniforms and fed and water, so they're not living off the mound in of and that's run on a shoestring by people who give of their time, pay their own telephone bills. It's all the money is going via nuns to Peru, because to pass money into Latin America,
Yeah.
often it can have palms have to be greased along the way, and it isn't. And the people running that, God, they give their all to it, everything to it, and it's changing lives. It
Yeah.
really does. Do you see a connection between personal ceremonies and global healing?
Absolutely. I think that when you do something, it doesn't matter if you've got an audience or it's your own way of doing ceremony with yourself and rituals. Healing begins with us. Everything that we see out in the world starts here. And so, when I talked before about awareness, ceremony is one way to do that. So it might be that you have a self-forgiveness ceremony for yourself. It might be having a ceremony for yourself about honoring your body shape or something like that, or a particular status you have, or, so overcoming shame and guilt and all those sorts of things. But then, of course, the ceremonies we do in our community, we might think, oh, it's for Joe Smith and whatever, and think that that's it. But everything has a ripple effect.
Mm. Yeah, I always love the beautiful quote of Mother Teresa, who said that love starts with small acts of kindness. And, obviously we can't all solve all the problems in the world, but we can have an effect on those around us from where we are. If you could gift every listener one practice to bring more sacredness into their daily lives, what would it be?
It would either be walking barefoot on the grass if you've got access to your own garden, or somewhere that's, free of glass or dog poo or whatever.
Yeah.
Being barefoot on the grass or just touching a tree. Just introduce yourself to a tree, say, "Hi, my name's Veronika. How are you?" And it might sound a bit out there or woo-woo or whatever, but actually anything that plugs us into the earth then centers us. It can help calm us. And the more calm people we have in the world, the better.
I love it. I absolutely love it. What do you reckon has been the greatest lesson you've had in living your heart-led life?
Learning to shut up. When I was a little girl, before we moved to the countryside, we were still living in a suburb. And my mother used to send me to the neighbours because I talked too much.
I have a daughter like that. Probably
And
my daughter's like that.
obviously, when I learned to read and write, things changed a bit because I could immerse in this other world of communication. But really, it was through my funeral celebrancy that things really shifted, because I very quickly had that awareness of, this is not about me. They don't need to know anything about me. Doesn't matter what we've got in common. And I've learned about not sharing relatable stories, which is what we tend to all do. We think that that's our bonding thing, but actually just to shut my mouth and listen.
Mm.
The only drawback from that is that really permeates to the rest of your life. So you can come out into the world and it just feels like everyone's talking all the time.
You notice it more.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, oh, could the world just shut up for a little bit?
Yeah.
So I have to remind myself that I was that person at one point.
Yeah. Well, me too, I think, to be honest. So, finally, what's next for you? Have you got any new books, projects, or dreams on the horizon?
There are always new books waiting. And Paul was telling me it was at Beethoven, somebody who had an unfinished symphony when they died. And I always have this, I wouldn't call it a fear, but I would really hate to die and have half-written books on my computer. That would really annoy me. Well, it annoys me while I'm alive. It won't matter afterwards. Yes, there are always several books on the go. What I want more than anything, you mentioned spaciousness, and that feels like such an important thing for me right now, because it's very easy for me to be a workaholic and work 7 days a week because many fingers, many pies, and
Yeah.
just trying to really pull back. And I just increasingly want to have space for fun and my own creativity. So I'm creative all the time in my work, but just to explore other ways of being creative and um, to relax into myself a bit more.
I hear you. I'm having a reread of Write That Love Story because I've got a wedding coming up and I wanted to read it before I started to write that love story. Oh, do you know what? This has been such a gift. I think in the day-to-day way we lead our lives and all the demands that are made of us, and the demands we demand of ourselves, we can forget to touch base with people who are really important. And you have been and will continue to be really, really important in my life. And I thank you so much for your time, and to be able to spend this Sunday morning with you has absolutely made my day. I want to thank you for your wisdom, your creativity, and your heart-led approach to life and ceremony. And whether people are experiencing a beginning or a transition or a farewell, you've taught me to honor all of these events with beauty, with reverence, and with love. I mean, for me, your training opened a door to a way of life that is more than a ceremony. It's about walking alongside others with presence, compassion, but also with courage. It takes courage to meet people where they are at these seminal moments in their lives. I know that so many people have been touched by your work, whether through your books, your ministry, your retreats, or your ceremonies, and that you've guided me and others. And thank you for showing up, what it means to live and serve from the heart. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been listening. May you too find ways to recognize the sacred in every day and to meet life's passages with openness and grace. Before we close, I invite you to take a moment today to reflect. What is one life passage, big or small, that you could honor with more awareness and love? It might be as simple as lighting a candle at the end of your day, pausing to celebrate a personal milestone, or holding space for someone else's journey. So I leave you with this blessing. May your heart be spacious, your words be kind, and your presence a gift. May you walk gently upon this earth, knowing that every thought is a prayer and every breath a sacred act. Until next time, take care and walk gently.